Today I have something magical to share with you. A special collaboration hosted by Uni Dolls where we all used Blythe dolls and created a character from a fairy tale. The artists who participated are Uni Dolls, Blythe Girl 123, myself, Blurred Colors Art, Blythe Obsession, and Bunny and Milky. Not everyone who joined has a YouTube channel, but I've linked all the artists below in the description box. Now let's get started. I've never customized a Blythe doll before and was very intimidated by the idea, but I think they can be very cute. So this is my experience as a noob working on an Icy Blythe doll. When I was invited to the collaboration, I already had this pink-haired girl on hand. I'm actually making Snow White, so her hair is completely wrong. I thought about dyeing the hair or even rerouting her, but all that seemed kind of risky to me. In the end, I purchased a completely new doll with the correct hair type and stole the scalp from her. The heads for these dolls come apart in 3 pieces: a front, a back, and finally the top or scalp of the head. If you have the right pieces, changing the parts isn't too difficult. Right now, I'm just removing the spring that makes the eyes snap back open after you pull her string. I didn't even know the purpose of the spring at the time. I was just following a tutorial on opening the head. I'm definitely not the best resource on how to customize a Blythe, but I hope you enjoy watching anyway. How I got the iMac out here was risky. I put pressure on the thin lower lid piece and could have broken it. Luckily it worked out. Time to say goodbye to this lovely pink. The head is made out of hard ABS plastic and acetone will melt it. I put all the tiny bits in a bag so I don't lose them. I almost did when putting the head back together anyway. Instead of using a solvent, I sand the factory face up away. Sorry for the shaky footage here. I didn't realize my camera was up against my ring light, which is on the table. Here's how the face sculpt looks all cleaned up. Even though this is my first custom Blythe and I didn't really know what I was doing, I decided to jump all the way in and carve the face. I already had various chisels and carving tools, so thankfully I didn't have to buy anything new to do this. I experimented a lot with different blades at first, but got a better feeling for what worked for me as I went. I have an iffy track record with rotary tools, but manually carving some of the deeper features by hand would have taken ages, so I gave it a shot. I'm pleased to say I didn't slip or gouge anything. In fact, I feel a bit more confident with my rotary tool now. We'll see how long that lasts. One last sanding. And it's on to painting the face. I prepped her just like a regular fashion doll and started laying down some base tones with pastels. And refining the shapes with watercolor pencils. I carved some of the lines in her lips pretty deep, so I needed to wet the paint to get into all of the cracks. I remembered at this point that I'm painting Snow White, so she gets lips as red as the reddest rose. The version of Snow White I'm doing is not based on the Disney version of the fairy tale. Instead, I'm basing her off of a book that I read as a kid. My grandfather was an avid reader and his house was literally stacked to the ceiling with books. I never had any issue finding an interesting fantasy to fall into whenever I went over to visit. I vividly remember a collection of beautifully illustrated fairy tales, their pages filled with watercolor paintings. They were pretty tame compared to most of the Brothers Grimm books, but still kept the mature undertones. The beautiful art and danger of them doubly fascinated my kid mind. The book I remember was Snow White as retold by Paul Hein and illustrated by Trina Schart Hyman. In this, Snow had wavy long black hair, dark eyes, and a slight frame, emphasizing her childlike nature. Her clothes stay the same, but also shift in design throughout the book. Sometimes her blue dress is checkered, sometimes it is striped, the neckline changes back and forth, and even though she consistently wears an apron, the bib appears and disappears. I can only guess that she has an assortment of very similar clothing that she changes in and out of. This custom is kind of a mix of how Snow White is portrayed in the book and my own personal flair. I definitely don't stay completely true to the artwork either. I don't have anything to draw for her eyes, so I'm putting some extra effort into her eyelids. I think I may have gone a little heavy-handed on this face-up. I used all the same techniques I usually do for vinyl-headed dolls. But I noticed a lot of Blythe customs rely more on the face carving or more pastels. Either way, I think they seem really sweet and soft. I like them a lot because of that. Still, I'm pretty happy that I can really see my style in her face-up, even though the base is so different. To finish her face, I want to change out the eye chips. Getting these out was more difficult than I thought. My craft knife got extra use on this doll. The first eyeball just slides off the plastic bar, and then you can take the rest of the bar out. You can accidentally put this back together incorrectly, and then the eyes won't change properly. And yes, I put everything back together backwards later. So next time I'll make a note of which eye is left and which is right before putting the new chips in. To remove the factory eye chip, I cut a glue stick in half and then melted one end with a lighter. I press the melted end firmly into the center of the chip. I let it cool until the melted end firms up again. Then I yank the chip out. If you want to reuse the chips, you can scratch the hot glue residue off easily enough. With all the factory chips removed, it's time to think about which new eyes to give her. In some stories, Snow White has blue eyes, and others they're green. I bought these chips off of AliExpress and will use 2 sets. For the other 2 eyes, I'll make custom pairs. Of the random eyes I bought, these 2 colors are my least favorite, so I'll harvest the glass from them. To remove the existing designs, I fill a glass jar with 90% rubbing alcohol. A lower percentage will work, but this is what I have on hand. I put all the eyes that I want to strip into the alcohol and let them soak overnight. After taking them out the next morning, the paper backing peels off easily. I wipe off the remaining alcohol, leaving the glass nice and clear. I drew up some eyes in Clip Studio Paint and then printed them out. I wasn't happy with any of the brown eyes that came in the random lot I purchased. I made 2 versions, one a little more yellow and the other a little more red. You can never really tell how they'll look printed. The color in the middle is supposed to be blind or dead eyes. Snow White is supposed to sleep as if in death, and I wanted to keep some of the original fairy tale's dark tones. I set the eyes aside to let the glue dry for a few hours, and while I wait, I glue in the 2 pairs that I had picked earlier. I just apply some Mod Podge glue with a toothpick to the white eye base and press the new chip in firmly. Any excess glue gets squeezed out and I just wipe it off so it doesn't dry all lumpy or fog the design. I'm just quickly testing that everything glued in the right direction and looks good. I'm satisfied with her new eye chips, and it's time to move on to the eyelid part of the mechanism. This is a step away from the watercolor paintings of the book, but I feel like the dripping skull apple is very iconic, and I wanted to do something fun and graphic for the eyelids. The surface was previously sanded and then sealed with Mr. Super Clear when I prepped the face. After sketching the design with a regular No. 2 pencil, I go in with acrylic paint. I'm keeping all of the colors flat with no shading. I want the design to read clearly. This is also the only real nod to the Disney version of Snow White, so I like that it looks like an animation cell. After the poisoned apples are done drying, I seal and gloss them with Sculpey Gloss Glaze. I want to give her some of my favorite fluffy lashes. I use the factory lashes to get the length of the new ones. Then I work them into the narrow space with my tweezers and craft knife. I didn't feel the need to add any extra glue. They are held pretty firmly by the plastic. Now it's time to put it all back together. It took just as much force to get the eyes back into the mech as it did to get them out. Here's how her face looks mostly put back together. I gloss her lips, waterline, eyeliner, and eyebrows before I close the head back up. She needs to be able to look like she's sleeping, so I traded out the spring I removed earlier for an additional pull string. This way I can control when the eyes open back up. I also lightly sanded the plastic T-bar so that her gaze looks up a bit more instead of down. The extra doll I ordered came in the mail just in time. I have to take the head apart in order to use the scalp. I knew what I was doing this time, so it went a lot quicker. The screw in the forehead goes first. Then I line up the back plate before sliding the neck peg into the slot. And finally I close the head. My daughter had a lot of fun helping me test her new pull strings. The blind eyes are her favorite. I tie her hair up and start working on customizing the cords. I put knots into the cord at about shoulder height so that the beads won't slide up into her hair. I'm using a tightly wound crochet thread. My husband has a nice collection of different types since it's a hobby of his. I was able to thread the cord on a needle to make adding the beads much easier. For the colors, I'm using a lot of earth tones in glass, wood, and plastic beads. I added a single whole apple to the bead that closes her eyes, and use an apple that has been cut into for the string that opens her eyes. I tied each one several times around the last bead. I want them to be able to take the pressure of being pulled on a lot. I'll be using clothing patterns from Stitch by Stitch with Lily. The bodice is from the Folklore dress pattern, and the skirt and sleeves are from the Bohemian maxi dress pattern. Like I mentioned earlier, the dress design changes pretty frequently in the book, but the color is consistent. I actually don't have enough of one type of fabric to make the whole dress, so I'll be mixing stripes and checkers. She also has a deep red underskirt and sometimes full dress that goes under the blue outer dress. To avoid bulk at the waist, I'll make a separate skirt layer that sits over her hips. Lily's patterns don't come with seam allowance, so I'm drawing in my preferred 4mm seam allowance. I had to plan carefully how I would cut out all of the pieces so I wouldn't run out of fabric. I decided to use the checkered pattern for the front piece of the bodice. There wasn't enough to do all of the bodice with it, so I used the thicker stripes for the back pieces. I made her an apron off camera using Lily's lace apron pattern, but far simplified. Her underskirt will have an elastic waistband instead of a snap closure. I'm hoping this way I can keep it lower on her hips without being too lumpy. I pin the elastic in place and sew it off camera. I also modified the neckline of the bodice to look like Snow's dress in one of the scenes. There's too much cleavage and we need the fake underdress to peek through. This is just a very simple rectangle strip that has been hemmed at the edges and has a Velcro closure. Now I can finally put her clothes together. Snow has a brown shawl that she wears. The pattern on this also changes frequently, but it stays repetitive and earthy colored. So I thought the wrong side of the swirly brown cotton would work perfectly. Of course, I have to sew it right side out and then turn it so we can see the muted colors. After turning and pressing the shawl, I used my machine to embroider red leaf around the edges. And now her outfit is nearly complete. In many of the paintings, Snow White wears a front-laced leather corset. The corset I'm going to try and make is the same one that the Wicked Witch tries to restrict her breath with. I made a few rough patterns with scrap paper towels, testing both over the base doll and over the clothes. Since this is worn on the outside, I'll need to use the wider pattern. I have a few scrap pieces of leather that were salvaged from recycled furniture. This piece is the right color, and it's really soft and broken in from being sat on a lot. I have some eyelets and a tool to try for the first time. These are 4mm, which is just a little big, but I'll go with it anyway. Hammering these was kind of intense, and I didn't want to break my desk, so that didn't get filmed. I guess my kit wasn't complete and the eyelet warped as I set it, but it'll work just fine. I trimmed and heat sealed the ends of a red ribbon. This is what I'll be lacing the corset up with, and yes, I'm doing it upside down. I redid it off camera properly. It's only upside down because the tie is at the bottom in the artwork. For accessories, I make her a basket with twine and glue. so she can gather some flowers. Here's how it looks after drying for a day. I have some more of the same twine that I twisted and left soft. This gets hot glued on to become the handle. And I trim a few flowers to fill it with. While I have flowers out, I will also make her a simple flower crown, just for some princessy fun. I stuff some of the smaller flowers around the larger paper roses. Then I trim the black ribbon and glue it together. I do a quick fit test. And then I decided she needs one more thing. A poisoned apple. I make a stem and leaf from the extra fake flowers. And set it in place with hot glue. Then I make some poison drips over the top of the apple, and I fill the hole in the bottom of the bead. I paint the drips off camera, and now I can finally call her done. Ever since I started customizing dolls, I've always wanted to tackle a Blythe doll. I've had this girl on hand for so long, I've just been too nervous to start her. But now that she's done, I can confidently say I enjoy working with Blythe, and I will be doing another in the future. In fact, my niece was over visiting and fell in love with her. So much so that she used her Christmas money to order a custom Blythe of her own. And of course a video to go along with it, so we can all look forward to that. I hope you all enjoyed watching me bring the Snow White of my childhood to life. Don't forget to head over to Unidoll's channel and watch her video where she makes Gretel. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.